how to create a schedule for yourself. I actually just did a whole workshop on that during my coaching week. And so I am a full believer that everyone who's learning a language should create a schedule for themselves. But the type of schedule you create, you know, it varies. And I kind of touched on it a little bit, so I can break that down. And so really, maybe I should get some visuals. I was not prepared to talk about this, but I can absolutely wing it. When it comes to creating a schedule for yourself, there are 4 different ways that you can structure your study schedule. Now the teacher in me is coming out because I'm like, let's get some paper, let's get markers. So it's about the way that I divide your schedule. Now watch the live stream embarrass me because it's going to show it mirrored. I bet 90% of the time it's going to be mirrored. Oh, it's not. Okay. So you can organize your schedule or structure your schedule based on the structure of time that you need and the structure of the task. So if you are someone who needs rigid time and flexible tasks for your schedule, that means that you need to study at generally the same times every single day or every single session. But when you sit down to study, you need your task, the thing that you are doing, to be a little bit different each time. You need your task to be a little bit more flexible. So you're like, Mondays, I always sit down in the afternoon, maybe 1 p.m. That is my study time. And every time I study, I get to do 2 to 3 things. I get to listen to a podcast, I get to work on my textbook, or I get to, do some journaling. And when I sit down at 1 p.m. every single time, I get to make that decision in the moment. Maybe you've decided that, no, actually you need rigid time and a rigid task. So you're saying, I sit down at 1 p.m. every single study session, and every time I sit down, I am focused on one thing, which is my textbook. That is the only thing that I'm doing. I am not looking at another task. I am not making a decision in the moment because that overwhelms me. That is the second type of schedule. So you might then decide, no, actually, I hate sitting down at the same time every day. If I, my schedule outside of language learning varies, everything's a little bit different. I can't guarantee that 1 p.m. is going to be a time that I am available. So I actually need more flexible time. So I don't want to choose the time in the moment. But when I decide to sit down, I need to know exactly what I'm doing. I don't want to make that decision. I wonder if I can pull up the slides for this. Let me see if I can do that, because then you will get visuals and not just me scribbling on paper. But I hope what I'm saying makes sense so far. I'm a visual learner, which is why I'm like hyper worried about saying a lot of words. Really, it's just about figuring out, when it comes to time, do you need to know exactly when you're going to sit down and do your studying, or do you like a little bit of wiggle room? And then when it comes to the tasks, so the strategies and the resources you're using, do you like to know exactly what you're going to do each study session? Or do you like to figure that out, in the moment? Some of the people that I work with have told me they're kind of in the middle with their tasks. Like, they have to figure it out the week in advance, but not, for their next 4 weeks. So the week before, on Sunday, they're like, okay, what is my schedule going to look like this week? And that's where it's a little bit more flexible, but also a little bit rigid. It's kind of a little bit of both. But knowing what works best for you is really important, because for me personally, at this point in time, it doesn't matter when I do my studying. My time is very flexible. But I have to actually tell myself, this is the 1 or 2 things that you're doing. Because if I don't set out and say, like, this textbook is what I'm focused on, I'm only going to use Dekiru Kankokugo. This is the only thing that I'm doing when I sit down, whenever I do it. If I don't say that to myself, I will pull out 3 textbooks. I will open up 4 apps. I will go on YouTube and I will browse for an hour, 2 hours, and I will do nothing. And then I will say, man, I don't have enough time to study anymore. I guess I can't study. And then I'll move it to tomorrow. I know that about myself. You might be in a similar position where it doesn't really matter when you're going to study. You know what's going to happen. But when you sit down to study, you just have to say, this is the only thing I'm doing. And that's it. Ignore everything else. You might say, doesn't matter when I'm going to study, and I can make the choice in that moment. I'm not going to get fatigued by making that decision. it's just important to know what works best for you, and also know that it shifts. Like the me that was studying languages 5 years ago, I had to also be really strict with my time. I studied at the same time for the same time frame, and I was really rigid with the tasks that I chose for myself. Now, I'm like, I don't want to do it right now, and I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it later, and I will. I will absolutely do it later. So, when you're creating a schedule for yourself, it's really important to know what kind of flexibility and rigid structure you need, so that when you actually create your schedule, you're more likely to follow it, versus if you try to force yourself to stick to a rigid time when that doesn't work to you. When you try to force yourself to make decisions each study session, that is when the procrastination sets in. That's when burnout happens, and when we avoid our studies altogether. That is not going to help you make progress. So when you're creating a schedule, and if you need help with that, you can literally just like message me, DM me, Instagram, TikTok. Don't know how well it works on YouTube, but I have a little community section over on YouTube for people who are there. Like, just if you need some support, ask me. And I'm actually, speaking of, I'm developing a free resource on the 4 schedules, because every time I talk about it, a lot of people, the response that I've gotten is like, I never thought about it that way before. And there's so many ahas that people have been sharing. They're just like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And now I know why the schedules I've created didn't work for me. So I just want to create like a little bite-sized training, I guess we'll call it, like a little lesson where I break it down with the visuals, or I might just use the recording I did for the coaching week. But essentially, I just want to have that available for people so that you can really get that understanding. And then for people who want a little bit more support, I think I might I'll figure out what it looks like. But if that sounds interesting to people, I might develop that further. Because I know for me, once I really analyzed schedules and thought about, well, why is the schedule no longer working for me? Because the reason why I even thought about any of this was because when I was, I stopped studying for a while because I finished college. I was starting a full-time job as a teacher, and I had to reevaluate how I was studying because my time looked different. I tried to follow the exact same schedule and routine that I had when I was in college, and it was not working because I had a lot more that I was doing mentally. So by the time I came home, I had a full day of teaching. Whereas before I had some classes, free time, like it was all over the place. So my time was different. My energy levels were different, and my goals have shifted just a little bit. So I needed something different in my schedule, and I wasn't listening to my body. I was listening to me, the signs. I wasn't paying attention to what wasn't working. I was just trying to brute force it and say, well, if it's not working, it's going to work. You just got to do it more. You got to push harder until you get this figured out. No, you need to pause, take a deep breath, and then you need to go, okay, well, what about this is not working? Why is this not working? If you know nothing else, I am a very reflective person. I reflect and think and ask myself why all the time. And I help people to do that as well. So that's why I personally have all these ideas. Like, I'm an idea person, because I'm always going, why isn't this working? What about this is feeling weird? What about this is, making me uncomfortable or frustrating me? I love to unpack that. That is my passion. So I do it so you don't have to. If you are someone who's like, Bront'e, good for you. I don't want to ask myself those questions. I just want to know why, and, I just want to get it fixed. Let me help you. I will ask those questions, and I will get down to the bottom so that you can just have the results. Oh my God, yes. As someone who is switching careers currently, it's hard to pivot. Yes, it is hard to pivot. And like the person that I was even before college when I was learning languages is very different than the person in my first year, because college was a very new experience, then the second year to fifth year, because I did a fifth year where it's like a dual degree. So I got my master's in teaching in my senior year / my first year of grad school. It was a different thing, a weird thing. And so that person was very different. The me that I was back then was very different. Then I started teaching. It was my first year of teaching. It was a new experience that I had to immerse myself in and understand. So my attention was different. Then once I got used to it, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, I was like, oh, I brought my textbooks to work. And during breaks, when my kids were like at lunch or at a special and I didn't have a lesson to plan, Korean textbook came out, podcast was on, headphones were on, and I was studying. Whereas I didn't do that my first year because I was so immersed in trying to figure things out. So you really gotta, that's why I say clarity. You gotta start with clarity. Because when you understand all those pieces, or you let me help you, because you're like, I don't want to figure it out. I just want someone to tell me. That's valid. When you start with that clarity, it's going to inform every decision that you make so that you can be strategic. So you're not wasting your time. You are not wasting your energy. You are not burning out. You are not feeling overwhelmed or frustrated. You're not, wanting to throw your textbook across the room, toss your laptop out the window. And you're also not looking at other language learners who are making progress while you are sitting there watching them make progress. You are actively doing things and seeing progress in your own studies and excited about it, celebrating it, saying, oh, I recognize more words now. That's amazing. Oh my God, I actually knew how to use this grammar. Like I finally conjugated this one Spanish word in the past tense for second person correctly. Like very, very specific win. But it's like, I've been working on this forever. And you celebrate that and you keep moving and you're seeing the progress because you're acknowledging your journey, not anybody else's. You're focused on what's working for you, what's not working. You're not feeling guilty about any of the things that have happened that didn't work. We're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. Can't be afraid of failure. We cannot be afraid of mistakes. We just have to say, when I do fail, what am I going to do about it? When I do make mistakes in my language studies, like we do in our native language, when I make mistakes, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to keep moving? Am I going to make a mistake and I can tell all the mistakes that I've made that I tell all the time. Now they're hilarious. In the moment, I was a little bit more embarrassed. But, for example, I remember trying to relearn Mandarin while I was also trying to relearn Spanish. And I was taking Japanese classes all in college. And I had a friend in my Japanese class who was from China. And I was like, we're friends and we're learning Japanese together. We're practicing languages. I'm going to also tell her that I studied Mandarin for a year and I feel like I'm a strong beginner. So I was like, I'm going to ask her a question in Mandarin because I'm amazing. My teacher said that my pronunciation is pretty good. Newsflash, it was not. It was not good. Tones were wrong. But I was enthusiastic. And I was trying to ask her, do you have a cat in Mandarin? I ended up asking her, do you have fur? And in the moment, I was like horrified because just that one tone completely changed the entire, question that I was asking her. But luckily she was a friend and not just a stranger. And she was like, I know what you're trying to ask. This is what you meant, right? This is the tone, and then she ended up just helping me over the course of the years. And she was my very strict Mandarin teacher. She was like, I would call her teacher in Mandarin. And she was like, nope, wrong tone. You did it again. You did it again. It's wrong. Bront'e, fix it. Like she was very strict with me, but I needed that. And she would drill these things into me and we would practice Japanese and Mandarin at the same time. It was an amazing experience. I loved it. I love these sort of things. But the point is, I make mistakes all the time. And even in the moment when I'm embarrassed, I have to remind myself to laugh and move on and just keep going.